Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue aux participants.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to all the participants who are joining us today, third day of FIC, the roundtable we are working on right now is about IoT. Is that a nightmare, a cybersecurity nightmare? So I think it would be very interesting for conversations around lunch. But for those who have already had lunch, why don't you listen to us? And while our roundtable experts give us their expertise, I'm very happy to moderate this roundtable. My name is François Lassagne. First, we have Sarah Dindum. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Infoblox? Thank you very much. I'm in charge of Infoblox on the French market. It's a company that's been around for 20 years, and we provide solutions for network DNS and so on. We also provide fundamental, essential security solutions for IoT. Now, Eric Singer, could you also tell us what you do in Schneider Electric and what your company does? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's very important to talk about IoT in a world that is more and more vulnerable. So my name is Eric Singer. I'm the cybersecurity manager at Schneider Electric for Europe, the Middle East and Africa. And I'm in charge of piloting the cyber strategy within the company in relationship with all the country residents of Schneider's in my area, my region, and I also manage all the cyber incidents that may happen in this region. So it means we can connect these incidents to Schneider Electric's position and posture, which means we can understand their risks, the ecosystem's risks. We can also connect with clients and protect and increase our cybersecurity. So Schneider, we sell a lot of IoT at Schneider Electric, so we try to protect them from the very beginning. I'm also a member of CESA. It's the cybersecurity #1 cybersecurity club, which gathers more than 700 security experts. I'm a member of the board of directors of CESA, and our mission is to extend CESA at the European level in order to create connections between various stakeholders to improve the ecosystem. Thank you very much. Now, Captain François Bouchot, would you like to tell us about your role as part of the judiciary service in the Gendarmerie Nationale? Well, hi, my name is François Bouchot. I'm in charge of coordinating cyber operations at Gendarmerie Nationale, particularly when it comes to the ComCyber, which is an entity that was created back on the 1st of August. So I'm no longer part of the legal department. In this department, I'm in charge of coordinating cyber operations. So we are connected to research sections that pursue cyber activities, and we give human resources and material resources to in this matter. As part of this department, I'm also connected with Europol and Interpol and all police, European police or international European police institutions, so we can coordinate actions because there are no borders when it comes to cyber crime, and so we try to work with different countries. I have a PhD in IT and electronics, in IoT, and how to take them into account from a forensic perspective, looking at a crime scene that would be connected. So there's a challenge when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to security as a whole, but there's also a very interesting angle, the forensic angle. Thank you very much, Captain. We might come back to this at the end of this roundtable. Jean-Christophe Mathieu, could you maybe introduce yourself and tell us what you do in Orange Cyber Defense. Hello, everyone. My name is Jean-Christophe Mathieu. I'm in charge of cybersecurity issues for industrial systems within Orange Cyber Defense. So we work at the global level. I don't think I need to introduce Orange Cyber Defense. It's the activity based on cyber defense for the Orange Group. So we work on the strategy and the development of Orange Cyber Defense, and IoT is definitely part of it. Thank you very much for introducing yourselves. Not going to do what we are supposed to do. I don't want to remind the fact that IoT represents billions of objects of very different natures. It's a very, very wide world, but I'd rather speak about a very plausible scenario. Let's say it's 2024, and Mobileye and Sixt in Germany have announced that there will be taxi robots, and it's 2024. And let's imagine that connected cars and partly autonomous are driving on the roads, and let's imagine hackers hack a car, and this car sends incorrect information, pretending that it's accelerating while it's slowing down, and so on, so that the taxi robots would be very upset. And it's a scenario that may happen. And Jean-Christophe Mathieu, Toyota actually has had accidents because some cars had been taken over as part of the systems. So I'm talking about this scenario in order to show that cybersecurity for connected vehicles is a concern, but we can go beyond this because the automotive sector is a very specific area, and I'd like to take a step back and say that nightmares do exist. They are potential things too, but with my four speakers, I'd like to ask the question about how concerned they are about IoT. What are the biggest concerns when it comes to IoT? As cybersecurity experts, what is of their greatest concern? What should you be vigilant about? You know, IoT has been around for some years now, and there are some concerns. Well, the first thing is that the number of IoT objects that are connected, by 2025, there should be 20 billion connected objects around the world. So, this concept of volume is paramount. Now, we're going to look at this from the angle of vulnerability and the type of exploitation you can have of specific data, particularly when it comes to DNS. And we detected this year a vulnerability that exploited a weakness in the DNS, and we thought that 100 million IoT objects were vulnerable because of this. So the idea is that nowadays attackers exploit vulnerabilities, but 80% of malwares are using DNS in order to do that. And there's also the concept of, mass of. We talked about cars, but for every industry, there's a very similar risk. Eric Center, same question. You have probably a different position when it comes to the industrial sector. Maybe some equipment can have very sensitive data. I'm thinking about hospitals and so on. What are the concerns about IoT? Are we going through that nightmare already? Is that your question? Is this nightmare, has it been around for some years now, or should we live with it in the coming years? It's a bit scary. I don't want to talk about, I don't want to use the word nightmare, but I think it's more like a preoccupation, and we need to anticipate risks, we need to analyze risks and threats. This environment is not a kind environment. Society is faced with ransomware attacks, there's more and more digitalization, everything's connected, and even companies like Schneider's that provides connected systems for optimizing energy and therefore provide IoT objects, we are affected by this issue. Back in 2017, I'm looking at my notes. At St. Jude's Hospital, that was more than 5 years ago. And the nightmare is not just today. It happened some years ago. This hospital made connected pacemakers, and there was a vulnerability on the pacemaker because it could be remotely connected, which meant you could deplete the battery of the pacemaker, so the heartbeats could be increased. So, if globally so it works for IoT, but in healthcare, vulnerabilities are a big issue, and we need to anticipate the risks, and we need to design objects, making sure we guarantee security by design. So, for me, the real nightmare is that we won't be able to control this whole set of IoT objects. They will be like zombies, basically, that we won't be able to see, that will be controlled by attackers or state organizations or non-state organizations that will be ready to attack DNS, and that's the nightmare, because we won't be able to control these systems, and it is very necessary as of now to anticipate and plan to control these devices, so in the future we can actually disconnect them. Thank you very much for getting to really this nightmare. So some elements have been mentioned already: the importance of DNS, zombie networks, and devices that can be used without unbeknownst to their users. So what's the position of Gendarmerie Nationale? What are the most important points of vigilance? Well, in order to answer your question, let me take a look at the definition of IoT. We define this as a group of objects that are connected, interconnected, that are used within an infrastructure, and this whole set of objects delivers services. So the first thing is that we have a group of objects, right? So we've talked about the car, we've talked about objects used in healthcare, pacemakers, for example. So all this equipment is very heterogeneous. And we are facing multiple objects with their own specificities, which are used in different contexts, because if you take healthcare IoT or car IoT or automotive IoT, or if you take domotics, you really have very different types of objects. So that's the first issue that leads to other issues in terms of managing all these objects, which means there are a number of vulnerabilities for us. So this question, this is the first issue. We are facing very heterogeneous objects, very different objects. So the next question is, when you have a domotic ecosystem and a healthcare ecosystem that interact, then rises another issue, another challenge, because there can be weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and the third point is about objects that are implanted locally, but that interact with very extended, widespread infrastructure. And their data can be synchronized or asynchronous. which means you have other types of problems. So you have hardware problems, you have software problems, infrastructure problems, so a lot of challenges. Now, when you look at it from the angle of cyber crime, it can lead to improper use of these objects. Take someone who breaks into a house, a domotic object, a home object, IoT, that is used to control an access can be diverted by or hacked by a criminal in order to manipulate the access. And pacemakers can be manipulated and therefore lead to the death of a person. So there's a need. Then you have other types of crime, ransomware. Mirai was very complicated, particularly when it came to using IoT, DOS attacks. So these are very traditional aspects of crime, but they are amplified due to the fact that information is and the architecture both are widespread or spread over. So it's very interesting to see that the scope of the problems we are facing. So let me tell you about two use cases. You know, an employee works for a company and brings his Bluetooth headset and listens to music from a music platform on his office computer. Sounds very common. Would that be a problem? Could Bluetooth devices be forbidden in open space environments? That's a question, you know. We'll see what you'll answer. And then another question, an employee is very happy to have bought a connected electric kettle. That's a British colleague. He's very happy he'll be able to have tea, and he has a connected kettle. And he works from his home almost 100% of the time, and his kettle is connected, but he uses the company's network. So could that be a problem? Could a person in charge of cybersecurity be a bit concerned? Maybe this employee shouldn't use his connected kettle. Maybe that's a bit exaggerated, but Jean-Christophe Mathieu, tell me, what do you think? What are the points of vigilance? Where should we be concerned? In which cases should we be concerned? Well, I think for years now, we've been talking about it. Let me give you an example. Eric is much more hardworking than me, but in the U.S., the northeast part of the USA didn't have the internet and didn't have access to the internet because there was manipulation of video cameras that basically all turned to a DNS, and so there was a major breakdown of the internet for a number of hours in the northeast of the U.S. So I think we need to make the difference between everyone's IoT, like a lock and IoT, so industrial IoT, equipment that we find in hospitals, in energy providers. And you've talked about the culture, about mindsets, right? If you go to an industrial site that is in transport or works for a hospital, if you say IoT, people might look like they're aware of something, or maybe they won't at all. I remember everyone was talking about IoT in a company, and one of the ladies came to talk to me and said, you know, even though she had an industrial background, she had no idea what IoT was. And when I explained what was behind IoT or IIoT, she said, oh, it's all about connected sensors, basically. So this is really interesting. It's a difference in people's mindsets, and it reminds me of the conference I held yesterday at the beginning of the afternoon. Once you don't develop a mindset and you bridge the gap between these two universes. You have companies like startups that have, very innovation focused, and therefore need to gain market shares, and they have economic interests. But they can have problems with the protection of the equipment that can be dangerous for entire ecosystems. So if you have a problem with a connected fridge that's supposed to tell you what you're missing in the fridge, if it's just 1 to 10 IoT in a home, it's nothing. If you take 100 of them with the same type of connection, then that can raise issues. But the same connected equipment that will detect nuclear radiations or potential contaminations, one can be manipulated, compromised, and then it can lead to disaster. So maybe the word nightmare is strong, but it's pretty close to reality. Thank you very much for answering my first question. Jean-Christophe Mathieu. Maybe it's a wrong idea, but IoT systems for control systems in the industry are usually thought as being very separate and independent, and even if it's not really the case, because there's always someone that's needed to do some maintenance, so there's no really watertight systems. But basically, when you have industrial equipment that's connected and that is used by very specific people, may not be part of, or may not lead to this IoT nightmare. So my question is this separation between this equipment and the other types of IoT objects, is there really a difference? And isn't there an evolution? And we've seen this with, the growth of teleworking. A number of sites can be controlled remotely, not necessarily controlled, but operated remotely. And a number of startups that are very innovative think they can optimize industrial equipment as long as they can upstream and downstream data. And do you think that the industrial world is now going through the difficulties IoT can represent for the rest of sectors? Well, this interconnection of systems is everywhere. Why? Because you've all heard of it. The industry of the future, the industry 4.0 is there. And we like this word. It's a very marketing work. We are trying to improve production systems. We talk about industrial systems, but I think it should be widened. When we talk about industrial systems, but I think it's like for the older generations, because I'm part of them, because I've been around for 11 years. And industrial systems are basically part of our daily lives. We all have jobs revolving around cyber defense or security, but that will stop if we cannot deliver electricity. And what is electricity produced with? By industrial systems. Imagine you wake up in the morning and there's no electricity for 15 minutes. It can become very unpleasant. And then go back in time. A few years ago, there were power cuts that were where? They were in Venezuela. There were very regular power cuts, and this led to riots at some point. So let me come back to the interconnection of these industrial systems. It's very important to connect them. It's important to set sensors, because this is how we can measure and improve our production systems, which means that in the future we won't be dependent on Asian countries. So these sensors are very important, because it means we will get KPIs and This is why we now talk about IIoT. We don't want to forbid IIoT. It needs to be helped out, accompanied, so things go smoothly. But it's very important to understand the challenges of the various processes involved, so that people can enjoy technical advances while enjoying a maximum of security. Would you like, Eric Singer, to add something? Thank you, Jean-Christophe. I think it's very interesting, and it completes what I'm going to say. Let me first answer your question. You talked about the use case of the connected kettle. Is this possible? Is it? Shouldn't a more general approach to security be taken? I'm going to talk about subjects that are not connected to IoT or IIoT, but simply about the security of information systems. When you have a user, you need to make sure whether this person is allowed to access this information system. So there's authentication needs that can be rely on a multi-factor identification, and it means that only authorized system can actually connect to information systems. It is true that every company has their own way to approach cyber security. But if you want to do it in a very serious way and mature way, you have to look at it from one end to the other end, end to end. When you have people in companies that have been trained, they have gone through mandatory trainings in cybersecurity. When they develop systems in research and development, as soon as systems are designed, whether they're industrial systems or IoT systems or even internet websites, they should be secured using the best practices, which means that if these systems can be connected to SOCs that will detect incidents and therefore will anticipate and react in the case of an attack. But we might talk about this later. Now, to elaborate on what Jean-Christophe said, let me talk about what we specifically do when it comes to IoT systems at Schneider's. We have a catalog that's called EcoStructure Building, and it means we can connect, we can identify presence sensors, a temperature sensor. We can maybe draw the curtains and so on. But indeed, as you said, we can upstream the information so we can optimize the system. When it comes to buildings, maybe it's not as important for industrial systems, but what would happen if there was a power cut? With all these IoT systems that have information sensors, and so they are so that these systems these systems need to be secured and protected, so that you know, this IoT can be connected to elevators too. So there are many nightmare scenarios. When we look at systems that are more critical, like the cloud, we may be able to act afterwards. So IoT, it's about sensors, but also about reactors. So there's like a cycle, and it means we can act remotely based on the incidents that have been reported. So this is how we can manage the incidents, but we need to integrate risks, which is why security is integrated in the design of IoT. We need to identify the various types of industrial environments and identify the risks. And it's true that in the Industry 4.0, will should be able to develop attack scenarios to determine what should be done if they happen and take extra measures. If you work on digitalization and work on IoT 4.0, you need to have systems with industrial firewalls, with industrial detection systems, which are connected to a system of management of industrial incidents. I'd like to talk the systems that are meant to be used by individuals should also be secured, because when it comes to domotics, anyone can take control of their, any consumer can be taken control of.
And of course for system designers, but as well for consumers, because consumers have an essential role to play. And we must also make consumers aware, raise consumers' awareness in terms of how to properly configure the equipment so that catastrophes don't happen, and also make them aware that as soon as the equipment is not properly configured, or if there's a design flaw or a configuration flaw, how consumers can be protected. Thank you, sir. So I'd like to turn to you, Sarah, to ask you about identification. What can be done? What efficient techniques exist? What solutions can we offer for the following issue? I have thousands of devices in my scope, and I need to be able to identify them quickly, mistake-free. Do solutions exist for that? Can you explain that to us quickly? Yes, of course. So just for the story, a story was published, and 48% of companies think they have between 1,000 and 5,000 IoT devices connected on their network. So what we provide in terms of IPAM solutions, it's this notion of visibility. So even if today we're able to segment networks, to set up filters, at any time, at any moment, the device sometimes may need to connect to access domain name resolution. So we will provide the solution in order to be able to identify the machine, to determine where it is, and then also provide contextual information, geographic location information, and this database is going to be enriched with constantly new information. We can associate it with types of machines. So the idea is to use simple rules, and this information tomorrow can be cross-referenced with APIs and provide this contextual information to the various security teams. So thank you, Sarah. So this capacity of use of objects, and not see these objects as ghost objects, but rather live objects that can be interrogated, questioned. And so that's a real useful application of IoT from a police point of view. Yeah, well, of course, but first I would like to say something about identification, because I think it's one of the major orientations in terms of when it comes to managing IoT connected objects. So we also need to think about mastering your infrastructure, but go much beyond the object, but include the whole infrastructure of the network into the equation. And not to mention that we have more and more new objects that are external to the company, that employees use, that are embedded or integrated in the infrastructure. And this can create new security flaws. So within the course of the guidance we provide to companies and governments, the French Gendarmerie has set up a division specialized in the digital interventions with a digital brigade that guide communities to may perform diagnostics and improve the security of their infrastructures. That involves local governments, small and medium businesses, or companies of all sizes. And the idea is to raise their awareness with ANSI or competent authorities. So that can be a first orientation in terms of providing guidance, and it's a fundamental one. Again, it's about raising awareness of the different communities and company employees, users, because one entry, one breach can be the way we use the object. So you can have a very good infrastructure, but we also need to take account of how these are used. Now, objects as opportunities, of course, we cannot. There is the whole aspect for crime investigation opportunities that's interesting. And then also there's the challenge of forensics, where IoT drives a digitization phenomenon, and this creates as many traces that can be relevant and useful to understand a phenomenon and solve an incident. But this can also be used in experience sharing to further improve security, to help investigations, and also for prevention purposes. Thank you very much, Captain. I'd like to get back to you, Jean-Christophe. We insisted a lot, maybe too much, on the name of the word nightmare, which is used in this roundtable, but your presence, the whole four of you, testifies that expertise is making progress, awareness is increasing, and we haven't spoken yet about standards and certifications that are starting to see the day, at least partially, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, starting with you, Jean-Christophe. Is that something we should celebrate? Do we have any evidence that some things are properly done? Well, cynically, I would say no, but that's for the joke. But one of your colleagues recently said that a happy customer is a loyal customer or recurrent customers. And you were talking about home automation earlier, and today it's cheaper to buy an entrance door that is controlled by your smartphone than a regular door that you open with a physical key. So I had a quick look on internet to look at connected doors, and there's a wide array of them, and I think you will have many new customers, by the way. But just to say that these are becoming increasingly affordable and increasingly popular, and the level of awareness in terms of how much we need to protect these objects is very high on critical objects. So industrial systems, but for home automation, people are not that aware, and we're really at the very first steps in this market. I worked for a competitor of Schneider for a long time, and we worked hand in hand with ANSI agency, and today in France there are patterns you can use to qualify or certify equipment for production purposes. So that's a real step forward. It's moving. Just yesterday I was discussing with different people from NC, and they have the hand on certification, harmonized certification patterns in Europe. And right here I see we have a real opportunity to make significant progress. But these are critical systems, and you've all said it and confirmed it, is that what can become a actual issue is the number of a single object, one object that would bear the same vulnerability or the same flaw for mass market product. That's a real issue. So encrypting or integrating encryption on a cheap object that costs just 10 euros, knowing that the encryption process costs around €1, no equipment manufacturer will be interested in that. So the question is, how much risk are we willing to take collectively with this kind of object? Because you will never sell a connected watch or a connected lock that will cost 3 to 5,000 euros, okay, and the development costs will just shoot up. So the idea is to find the right balance, what needs to be normally secured, highly secured, or just basically secure. So what level of security do we need depending on the object? And Captain Bouchot, how do you feel about this? Do you think things are heading in the right direction? Well, I'd like to react to the comment that on the question of encryption of connected objects. So what's important to take into consideration when we consider connected objects is what kind of use I will make of it. So if I include encryption on a captor, so first it's going to consume a lot. So are we going to turn a basic object into a strong box for a basic use, or should we rather work more on the data reception side of things, or other systems that can monitor data quality? This is very much what we see on in onboard systems, for example. And this question is relevant when we look at objects that have onboard systems or critical systems that are critical for the proper functioning. That's where we need a high level of security. We have an observatory in the French gendarmerie for smart transportation systems, and we work with the automotive industry for all the certification part, and namely the guidance of standardization of a certain set of processes, both on the vehicle, onboard systems, multimedia, and because it's a system of a system, we also look at the infrastructure behind it, because the vehicle is designed to communicate with the infrastructure, and this guidance is something we provide, or it is provided also at European level, in order to standardize and the manufacturing process. There's also the question of identification, because we use equipment that come from different markets that use different frequencies. So there's that need of guidance, for example, for a connected object on the American market, XXID. So why not have this standard in Europe so we can have proper communication for the European market? So there is a need at this level, an evolution that's heading in the right direction in terms of guidance for questions related to security, standardization, normalization of connected equipment. Thank you. Eric Saint-Ger, any indicators that suggest we're heading in the right direction? Well, should we celebrate? That's the first question. Should we be happy? In cybersecurity, we're never happy. We never celebrate. We're constantly trying to foresee the next issue, constantly trying to learn what's happening in the company and outside the company, and we must always be on our toes, and that is capital. So to react to what Jean-Christophe said about the connected door, me at home, I have a connected dog. It has a chip in its ear, a connected cat that allows it to open a little cat trap, and only this cat, okay? And so when I do the risk analysis, you know, with my cat versus other cat, well, I say, well, there is absolutely no risk. But if everything is connected, it's not the same story. So in this round table, okay, I say I have a connected cat, so it's part. So should I be happy about the fact of having a connected cat? I don't know, but what I know is that connected objects are around us, and what we observe around us allow us to move forward. So are we heading in the right direction? It depends. So on the certification questions, yes, indeed, with norms, standards of security design or by design. We have a standard that's SDLv2. It's essential if we want to secure development from the very design stage. With certification patterns, schemes, we have different steps. We must comply with standards. We must have good practice. And step 3, we must be certified. And that's the truly important point. Second aspect is we must be able to work in a community mode. And, for example, For the Cézanne, we have a seminar in December, and the subject is applicative security. So it's the concept of security inside today and tomorrow. So we're going to run during the Congress, we're going to bring together 200 cybersecurity experts within the course of a Congress, and we're going to work on how do we do security by design, the different systems we develop, so with collaboration between strategic economic partners, and this collaboration is essential, and at that level, things are heading in the right direction. Another second point is awareness raising and information. So I said a few words about it. Okay, awareness raising of employees, users, consumers, and other aspects to be taken into account. And Jean-Christophe mentioned it. It's everything related to the life cycle of the system. And it's hard versus innovation concerns to integrate old vulnerable systems into an IoT ecosystem and how to protect them, because there are new vulnerabilities coming that is going to put our architecture, jeopardize our architecture, and how do we use older systems with that. So that's a real issue. We need to be able to know whether am I able to improve the security of the existing system. So we need to work on that. And for me, that's a true concern, a point of concern. And the question will be, will we be able to stop certain systems that cannot be secured anymore because they have become obsolete? So we are starting to work on that question. And of course, there's the question of innovation. Jean-Christophe, you spoke about it. We must be able to integrate innovation and yet not compromising the security balance. And if we don't take security into account at the innovation stage, then it's going to turn into a real nightmare. I will remember your connected cat. It's rare enough to be remembered. So the question again for you, Sarah, and technology levels, are there any levers we can rely on to achieve proper security levels in complex IoT systems, because they are eclectic or big or large? Yes, and what we were saying with Eric is we should implement some good practice in the security policies and cybersecurity IoT policies. And indeed, one of the first quick wins we can achieve is maybe to invest in a secured DNS. It's a quite basic approach, but nonetheless efficient when it comes to managing threats, to prevent or avoid attacks by malware. And there's a lot of demand, and there's a big market in this area. So using DNS as a first line of defense. Thank you, Sarah. Jean-Christophe, Mathieu, the question that will close this roundtable is what should be our priority. So we've identified some of the many challenges we're faced with. For example, we should induce more constraint on the designers, so push more for security by design and include security at the very design stage of any object. We also mentioned the question of cyber culture, and cyber security should be more widespread in the popular culture, and then think in terms of systems and ecosystems and not in terms of object and equipment, to better grasp the diversity of IoT-related vulnerabilities. And maybe we could push it even further and count more on automation, AI for automation, remediation. That's another possible lever. And then maybe, you know, I don't know, put connected cats to sleep. I'm sorry, it's cruel to say that, but Jean-Christophe, you mentioned it, a connected door today is easier and cheaper to find than a conventional door. So what if we told ourselves that we we could perhaps use more basic, simple equipment to avoid cyber threats and use less connected objects, maybe. So these are lots of levers we can push. But what priorities do you see? What should be the priorities? If we should focus on one thing first, what would it be? Well, the connected door. I have solved this problem. I just continue to use a key, but maybe people are aware of it, but maybe the second passion of hackers is to counterfeit keys. So I'm not sure it's a relevant topic today, but the priorities, and we mentioned it at the beginning of the roundtable, and this is something I experience every day in the company, in customer companies. The first gap to fill is the cultural differences between the demands that are often in conflict or in opposition with one another. When people in your team develop products, somebody here spoke about transportation and the transportation universe, and this is a very particular universe. I think you've all seen fully automatic driverless metros. Technology is quite advanced, but still quite old at the same time. Okay, when you speak about operating security, I tried not to use it, but okay, you used it. So if we want to secure those systems, sometimes we need to challenge everything. And I was asked this question last Tuesday in a plenary session. The operating security, it's probability-based. We use mathematics, formulas, and there are different ways to ensure that there will not be any collision. There are lots of things, and if we want to introduce cyber into that, it becomes a complex thing, and that would be, in my opinion, one priority to fill the cultural gap between universes. If we are not able to understand each other, we will go nowhere. If we look at the example of detection equipment in the industrial world, detection sensor, if you place it in the wrong place, well, your system will be either segmented or just down, and the sensor will not detect anything. So people need to work together to spread the culture, to raise awareness. And I'd like to conclude with one point. Big industrial organizations that do standardization, harmonization also work on standards, and IOC 443 for people who develop big industrial systems. We're far from the connected cat here, and I'm sorry about that. Sorry for the cat, because one day the trap will just not open for the cat. But we're talking here about like huge industrial systems, and in transportation, the 150 norm is starting to take account of security concerns. And yeah, we might want to celebrate that a little bit, but the priority is that everybody should be talking with one another. I've been pushing for that for the last 11 years, perhaps not very successfully, but if we speak to one another, maybe we will get there. Captain Bouchot, would you like to tell us what your priority would be? It's not easy, but if there was one, well, I'm in line with what Jean-Christophe says about acculturation. I think this is one of the major orientations for cyber security, to spread the culture across employees in companies and industries, but also the general public on the use of connected objects and their environments. If we speak about the connected cat or the connected door or connected industrial systems, the common point is that everybody uses connected material should be aware of the fact that there is a cyber threat or cyber risks behind it, and this acculturation concept is fundamental. We work with police officers to raise their awareness on the cyber world, to integrate in their initial training the cyber aspect of things. And this cyber aspect is integrated when you start raising awareness in industrial companies or communities. And also in our investigations, we use cyber notions. Even in conventional investigation, there is a cyber aspect. In forensics, then it becomes something indispensable. Eric Saint-Ger, what would be your priority? Well, Choosing means excluding, so instead of choosing one, I will choose three. So the first orientation is innovation is essential, fundamental, but we need to change the culture here once again. And thank you, François, for mentioning that. And the idea would be that cybersecurity should generate value, to create value in innovation and make it a widespread idea, acknowledged idea that innovation without cybersecurity is irrelevant. If you buy a fridge, a connected fridge, and there are lots and lots, but if there's no security in it, well, don't buy it. And that should be embedded in people's minds, okay? So no innovation without cybersecurity and inversely. So that's the first orientation. The second orientation would be everything regarding incident management. We speak about a security operations center that is like secured cockpits that can detect threats, that can foresee incidents, a kind of SOC for IoT, to forward and communicate information via various systems. There are lots of systems that exist for that, but we're able to forward information to be able to provide a quick response in the event of an attack, and that's an essential, response time is essential. And the third aspect is to be able to cooperate and collaborate, and we see the people here around the table, whether people from Orange Cyber Defense, the Ministry of Interior, Internal Affairs, or Homeland Security. We all have a relevant role and primordial role to play in the question of cybersecurity. So this collaboration between manufacturers, developers is essential, and it will allow us to work together and to produce interconnected system so we can protect ourselves and protect consumers and protect the society to have a more secure life and live together in a more secured way. Thank you for this answer. And we see that trust is very important, and trusting the object we use, we buy, and choosing these objects because we trust them, because we know that they have proper security levels. Sarah, I would like to ask you what your priority would be. So there are several orientations again, and we've covered many topics, but one important point is not to compromise all the contributions that IoT can provide us with. If we develop them, it's because they create value in our everyday use. So we need security, but we must not jeopardize or compromise the benefits of connected objects. Now, we often have organizational issues in companies on the scope of responsibility of one another that's not always clearly defined, and sometimes they can be conflictual. So we spoke about the importance of cooperation in industrial ecosystems, but this cooperation must be fluid and smooth. And then, of course, the question of creating values, not complexify the use and the solutions of security, but rather to create some cross-functional value. So the idea is not to stack up more layers, but rather to have solutions to easily identify an issue and put a solution against it. Thank you very much for this answer. Would anybody like to offer a last comment and make us hopeful and optimistic and not have this nightmare? So, okay, so I will say the final word. So thank you, Jean-Christophe Mathieu, for the light you have shed, your experience, Jean-François Bouchot, for telling us, giving us the police point of view and national police point of view on IoT. Thank you, Eric Singer, for your experience sharing and sharing the concern you are faced with in IoT and OT. And we see that it's still two different universes, but that are somewhat intertwined. And thank you, Sarah, to giving us the editor's perspective and explaining to us what solutions exist and how they're progressing. And thank you, everybody in the room for attending this roundtable, and I hope that we have managed to convince you that we are not necessarily, the nightmare is not in front of us, but rather behind us, although there is still a lot of work to be done, technologies to be developed, normalization, standardization to be achieved on essential subjects so that IoT becomes a trust-based or trustworthy IoT and connected object, but it seems that this subject goes far beyond the mere question of IoT, and it's more a general cybersecurity concern and relevant to all professionals in the room and on stage. Thank you, everybody. On behalf of everybody here and the forum's organizers, enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.